Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. It's Wednesday morning, but I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of questions, so I don't think doing it a day early is a big deal, but let's jump in and see what we got. First up, Dustin Madison wanted to continue the conversation from last week about potentially doing stuff to get paid at cons, like the comedy shows that he does. And I kind of had some thoughts about that. And Dustin said they agree completely. If anything, they're a bit too brutally realistic. They've got a day job they're fine with. They set up shows for others, mostly their good friends. And at the end of the day, them performing is their hobby. So is tech, movies, anime, fishing, weird organized crime history, gaming, etc. And getting paid for a hobby is lofty at best. They would love to just love the chance to combine a couple of their hobbies, not lose a ton of money, and maybe travel a bit and broaden my horizons. They've already sent pitch letters to a few cons. Fingers crossed at least one of them comes back as a yes. So it is my opinion that that is an amazing way to look at this stuff. And of course, if it ever picks up and, who knows what's going to happen, roll with it if it does. But I think your plan is absolutely perfect and exactly what someone in your position should do, which is just, try to make a little beer money out of it. But at the very least, enjoy yourself, have a ton of fun, and just kind of sink into all of this. Also, Dustin shared a link to the last con, the little stand-up thing he did there, but I'm not sure if he wants that public. So I'm going to ask Dustin, and if you see a link in the description, it's there, and if not, I'll post a link to another one. But I'm assuming that's family safe if you did it at a con, so that's probably one that I'm sure you wouldn't mind sharing, but I'll ask just to make sure. Next up, Jason D wanted to continue the conversation about the RGB to S-Video converter from last week, and they said they've read good things about the ones from Wakaba Video on eBay, and they've also seen a high-end one by AshenWorks with dual S-Video and Composite. They haven't used either personally. Do I know about either of those? I have personally tested both, and both worked really, really well for S-Video, and then both had the same exact problem you would always find for composite video. So I would absolutely recommend both for going from RGB to S-Video for all the reasons I talked about last week. I don't want to waste everybody's time and go through it all again, but yeah, those are excellent. Those are definitely the ones that I've tested. There were a few others out there, though, and somebody actually reached out to talk about another one that could be potentially better for composite video, but I would want to try that one first because there's a lot that could go wrong, and unless you hit it with some certain scenarios to make sure it's working right, I take my recommendations seriously. I guess I could just be like, I don't know what this is, try it out and see, but I don't know. I'm kind of curious myself, so I'll figure that out. But for just RGB to S-Video, either of those are great. I don't know if you would need the extra features of the AshenWorks one because you could have two S-Video outputs, but it's really up to you. It's just pick whichever one you'd like. Just remember that composite's not going to be great on either, just due to how this conversion system works, but S-Video should be fine on both. Next up, 2 Milligrams has a couple of questions about getting composite video out of certain devices, like PCs outputting 240p via CRT-EMU driver or Raspberry Pis. And I read every word of your question, but I think you got a bunch of it wrong. And I mean that respectfully. It's confusing. There's like 5 different ways to go about doing this. So let me just give you the very basic overview and then continue to ask questions if you want me to clarify at any point. But when it comes to the Mister, there are 2 ways of getting composite video. By far the best one is using any of the Mister specific adapters, which is based off of the Mic S circuit and uses code in these cores to generate composite and S-Video. And those are almost identical to the quality of original. And so you could argue if a original console has excellent composite video output, this might be as good, but there are some consoles that have terrible composite video output, and this might be better. But either way, it's as close to generating true composite video as you possibly could get from a Mister, and it's an excellent solution that I strongly recommend for anybody who uses that wants to do it that way. Now, on the flip side, not every single core supports it, although almost all do. So if you have a PC or if you have a consumer grade CRT with only composite video input, you could rely on some of the just converters, but then you're going to run into the same problem I talked about last week with composite video and all of the problems that's run into with that. So really your only choice would be, I don't even know if they're still sold, by the way, but the Retro Castle ones with the variable capacitor in them. I actually had that set up for months, almost a full year on one display. I had a consumer grade CRT flipped on its side, and then I had composite video going into that, and then S-Video as well. But long story, I'll just skip to the end and say, because some of the arcade cores cores I was using didn't have support for that. And then I think they got updated, so that wasn't a big deal anymore. So really for the Mister though, I would, at that point, I would just say get the right ones. And if a core doesn't have native support for it, maybe politely message the creator if it's important to you. If you support them on any of the support services, definitely do it that way. But I think that's the best overall for Mister. Now, when it comes to other stuff like Raspberry Pis and PCs, there's a couple of things. Now, the Raspberry Pi can still get composite video output. You need to do a mod to the newer ones, but you just solder 2 wires and then add some code. And I've had some pretty good results with that. If you want RGB and composite video, I did the live stream on the latest Recall box, which works great. So Raspberry Pis are, as almost as easy as it gets. You need to put a little work into it, but with these projects, you always got to figure you're going to do something, some code changes, a little bit of soldering, whatever. So that's not bad at all. And if you want RGB and composite, just get the Recall box hat and a nice case for it and everything just plugs in at that point. And that worked excellent as well. Now, when it comes to PCs, that's where things get weird. You could try to find one of those older video cards that also outputs composite video, but you're talking about a 20-year-old video card, which probably would be fine for MAME and some older stuff, but I don't know how that's going to work for emulating consoles. Then you would get into, okay, well, what about VGA to composite or RGBS to composite? And it's the same exact problem I talked about last week. You would need to dial in each console, each core, whatever you want to call it, but you need to dial in each one to make sure that the signal output is good. And you could probably get away with, finding a happy medium, but that's not going to happen with a generic converter. And also, if you wanted to try to find something like you get a modern PC to output 640 by 480, so then you stick it through an HDMI to VGA converter, so now you basically just have VGA. You could find VGA to composite converters, but it's the same as HDMI to composite. 99.9% of them are going to downscale that to 480i. So unless you happen to be playing a game or emulating a game that had a 480i option, that's not going to look right, and it's not going to be the experience you want. So basically, other than the Mister, it's really, really complicated to figure out how to get this stuff working. And I don't think a solution that's worth buying for composite is going to be found for under $50. I think, in fact, it's probably going to be more expensive than that. Total speculation. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to see all of these things reappear from community members and sold for $1, but I'm just trying to be realistic here. So so let me know if you want me to elaborate any more, but that's the basic overview of this stuff. And when you get into the PC world, things get there's so many more options and not many of them are great, but maybe I'm missing something. There's some amazing devs that listen to these. And, if you're one of them, please chime in, either DM me like you usually do or chime in the comments. If I'm missing something, I'll happily, I never have a problem being wrong. It's actually very, very easy to be wrong. You just look at the camera, you say, I'm sorry, I screwed up. You explain why you screwed up. You make it right, and you try not to do it again. So I have no ego when it comes to being wrong. So please let me know if I screwed up the PC part. But Raspberry Pi and Mister, I'm pretty sure I got spot on. Next up, Leslie Tanner is a filmmaker, and their main project is entirely VHS based, and they're doing pre-production work for a feature-length thing to be released on platforms that have 4K capability. Their question is if there's a way to tinker with the exact look of the upscaling or capturing that RetroTink or Bravocon does, either from tape or from video captured at 480i. They know for a lot of archival purposes, this is probably not as important of a question. No, because for archival, you just leave it at 480i. But for their project, they're very focused on preserving the softness, graininess, noise, etc. of the VHS tape, and they know a lot of upscaler or capture devices can smooth that stuff out. So I think I have the answer to your question, and I think I could at the very least point you in the right direction, but as you would expect, this stuff's kind of complicated. First, the reason that I like using the RetroTinks to either capture and scale or just capture and then scale with Bravocon afterwards is because it is as close to the original look as possible, just in a higher resolution. Because what Bravocon does with its scaling is it reads the fields before and after the one that it's currently reading, and then uses that software to build an image based on the image around it. So imagine each discrete field, so half a frame, and it uses all of that info to piece it together. And that's how you get so close to the original without a waxy or fake look to it. Now, the scaling built into the RetroTank, I don't think a real-time scaling device could use the software scaling that Bravicon does. I mean, I showed in those videos, like a 3-minute video took 10, 15 minutes to scale. So that's not possible in real time. But the stuff that's built into both of the RetroTanks still does an excellent job with all of this. So depending on what your final look would be, I would kind of experiment with both of those. I know it's a pain, but because you're a filmmaker and you're doing this for a final project, spending a whole day messing around with this is a very good use of your time. Whereas somebody just messing around for home video use, I don't know how much time I would spend on this, but basically take a VHS tape that, take a VHS tape that you don't have to worry about ruining. Don't use one from your movie. Just take some basic footage outside or something, bring it in, and capture it through the RetroTank, and then also capture it using different scaling methods. So if you go into the scaler menu, you could choose, bilinear, nearest neighbor, whatever, and try seeing if that tweaks the output any way that you would like. And also just use Bravicon and don't enable noise reduction. And then you could kind of figure out what to do from there. Is there one that is closer to a look that you're going for? And the other thing that's going to be complicated that you're going to have to decide what to do on is, what is the final frame rate of this video that you're putting out? Are you going to put it out at 5994, even in 4K? So essentially it looks the same way as like a VHS home video, or are you going to release it as a 24p film frame rate? In which case you would have to, I forgot what they call it. It's not inverse telecine, but it's taking 60 and putting it to 24 instead of 24 to 60. So I'm not sure how that's going to change the overall look and feel of it, but that's going to be artistic decision. That's something that, figure out with everybody on your team what their plan is, and maybe show them examples and see how this applies. If you were doing a video that's 100% VHS based and it's supposed to look Blair Witch Project-y, if you're under 30, you definitely don't know what I'm talking about, and I apologize. Old people get it. But if you're going for that look, I would do 5994 for NTSC and really have something that looks like VHS footage. But that's my guess, and I don't know your full project. So once again, that's going to be totally up to you. But yeah, basically, the answer to your question is either use the RetroTank for everything or use the RetroTank for 480i and then scale that through Bravicon. Now, I have to at least mention that the time-based correction in the RetroTanks, especially with the new beta update, is excellent, and something like that is required for tape transfer. But since if you're a filmmaker, you're doing a full-length movie type of thing, you might want to look into buying used broadcast time-based correction, which would do a better job. Now, how much better and in what scenario, that's a dice roll. If you're recording all of this stuff on new old stock VHS tapes that were in good quality, let's just hypothetically say there was a hermetically sealed box in an air-conditioned and humidity-controlled room with a ton of VHS tapes in them, and all of your recording equipment has been fully refurbished and is basically brand new, then it's not really going to matter. But any type of tape noise or any kind of blips in the tape, that's where time-based correction really, really will make a difference. But I mean, also, if you're doing something that's supposed to look VHS based, having a couple of blips on screen is kind of exactly what you would expect from home videos. So, you have a lot of choices, Leslie, and I don't really know, without knowing your full project, I certainly can't do anything other than lay out some of the stuff you might run into. But at the very least, I could answer your question in that just don't use AI scaling or don't use noise reduction, because while that might be cool for home videos, sharing on social media where you deal with tons of social media video compression anyway on top of that, I don't think that's going to work in your scenario. So yeah, basically just use the tanks to do it and choose which scaling method you want. Probably bilinear, I would assume, is going to be the one that would work for you, but don't use AI for this one. But any other questions, feel free to reach out. I love working on projects like this, and I could try to be as much of a help as I could. Next up, Apothecary 2 wants to talk about the PlayStation 2's optical audio output. Is there any reason that you should use that over the RCA cables or shouldn't use it over the RCA cables? They don't notice any differences besides optical being a bit louder for a given volume setting. However, sometimes all audio is lost when a game changes video modes until a restart with optical. So my answer to you would actually be functionality based in most cases. So let's just say the hypothetical scenario, right? You have HD RetroVision cables, which are arguably some of the best RCA cables ever made, and then you have pure digital clean optical audio out. So using those HD RetroVision cables, there is zero negativity from that. It's analog audio the way PlayStation 2 owners always heard it. You're not missing anything from that, but you do get a completely clean signal with no analog audio noise if you use the optical out. So what I would have asked you if you hadn't made that last statement, is there one that's easier for you? And if not, I would just try both and see if your ears prefer one over the other, because some people prefer analog warmth for certain scenarios. That's a big discussion about vinyl. And for video games, for me, it depends on the game and the console, but sometimes having pure digital audio is an advantage. But the fact that that you said sometimes all audio is lost when a game changes video modes until you do a restart with optical, that means that your receiver is kind of glitching out. It drops the signal, it brings it back, and your receiver doesn't understand what's going on, or your speakers or whatever else. So I imagine restarting your amp or your speakers would probably fix it as well. Please let me know if it doesn't, because that would be kind of weird, and it's something that I would probably just want to know about. But yeah, I mean, if anybody else has any comments, let me know. But for the most part, I would just say functionality first. As long as you're using good analog cables, if one is way easier for you, then use that. If one is certainly, significantly better for you, like if you had told me I still get a lot of hum even with HD RetroVision cables and a good amp, but I don't get any hum at all with the SPDIF output, then that's your answer. So I don't know, for you, maybe it would be because you're getting signal drops when the game changes video modes. Maybe just continuing to use good analog cables is good enough. But if anybody else has any thoughts or has run into this issue, maybe this is an easy fix that I just don't know about. But it's a great question, so looking forward to reading the comments for that one. Next up, Ryan Pinney has a question about CEC control with the RetroTink 4K Pro. They're looking for a way to turn on their TV and sound system automatically by using the RetroTink remote. They know there's a CEC injector from the Pulse 8, but they want to make sure that it's a feasible option for their setup. It's an HDMI 2.0 setup, so would that affect the way the RetroTink displays HDR or other image quality? Any thoughts on this? They know they might be lazy, but they'd rather use one remote to turn on the whole thing at one time. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to help you on this one. All of my comments are about to be guessing, but hopefully I could point you in the right direction. First, I am still that person that uses whatever remote I need to use. For years, I was obsessed with one remote. I wanted, one remote to rule them all. And I had one that looked really cool with like an indigo touchscreen front like 20 years ago. And like I messed with some of the programmable ones, and it never failed, and that every time I got it working perfectly, something would happen. And 99% of the time, something would happen when I would tell somebody, hey, just grab the remote, hit the volume, it works the same as every other remote, and then it wouldn't. That's always the way it goes. This stuff works perfectly when I'm just using it, but when somebody's over, I look like a total idiot. I can't program a remote, and I just get sick of it. I spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars over years, and I never got any solution working perfectly. Or there were cases where it was just faster to use multiple remotes. So I'm not really a fan of trying to combine them. However, and I also don't know about the CEC injector from Pulse 8, but if this is a device where it senses the HDMI port coming on, and so it sends a signal to your other devices to also power those on, that should work fine. And as long as it's compatible with 4K 60 in both HDR and SDR, that should not affect your setup. Those are all guesses, though, because I'm not sure about the device you're talking about. But that should work fine, and it should do the trick. Turn on the RetroTink remote. That would power on the TV. Then your receiver should you should have that set to power on if it sees your TV go on. So basically, you just need... In this scenario, you should just need your TV to go on with the RetroTink. You could try to look into your TV settings. It could be as easy as if your TV senses a port come online that it would turn on, and then also turn on your receiver as well. I don't think the LG TVs I have do that, but I vaguely remember seeing this as an option at something. Maybe it was PC monitors, or I don't know. That's certainly worth just looking into before you spend any money, because really, what would you rather do? Waste 15 minutes of your time researching something that turns out to be a fail, or buy something that you might not have needed? I feel like most of us nerds wouldn't mind a little bit of research. So yeah, I'm sorry. I don't really have a great answer for you there. I just have my excuses of why I don't use it and a little bit of info. But assuming that's how the CEC injector works, you should at least have no downsides to it from the RetroTink's point of view. Next up, Christopher Skurig said after spending a lot of time upgrading their CRT setup, they wanted to give their plasma a second life. First of all, when they use their mister on it, motion clarity is just great, even on a 2010 model. Colors in black are absolutely great, and really there's a CRT feeling when it's moving. Their concern is about upscaling and filters. As you can imagine, brightness isn't great and HDR didn't exist, so would there be a benefit with filters and brightness with either the RetroTink 5X or OSSC Pro, and which of them would I take in that situation? They have to be precise and say they'd like to use their PlayStation 2 and their Dreamcast on that plasma, which also has VGA and component inputs. Well, that's an excellent question. From a lag and cost point of view, I would try just connecting your PlayStation 2 and your Dreamcast directly to those inputs. VGA for Dreamcast, component video for PlayStation 2, and see how it goes. And my guess is it's going to look great. Most plasmas, because of how they have to buffer the signal, they're all going to have about 2 to 3 frames of lag, but in every mode from every input. Now, that's not all of them. I'm positive there's going to be different use cases. Grab yourself a lag tester device if you want to verify this stuff. However, all of the Panasonic ones I've tested worked like that, and they're just great displays. But if you wanted to add more resolution to them, you wanted to add filters and try different stuff to it, you could go through any scaler at all, really, that has stuff. But what I've found, and maybe this is just my beat-ass 50-inch plasma that has a lot of hours on it, but what I have found is that the CRT mask emulation looks very, very weird on plasmas, whereas just straight-up scan lines, horizontal lines look fine. So on the ones that I have personally tested, I can't speak for all of them. I'm sure there's people really mad right now going, mine works flawlessly on my plasma. Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to know what model you have that does, but I don't bother with filters on the plasma. I just use it as is. And I also try to use the plasma when it's stuff that's like kind of period correct, which PlayStation 2 and Dreamcast, absolutely. That would count as you could have definitely bought a plasma TV when those consoles were out and still being used. Maybe they weren't the newest consoles out, but they were still stuff that people had, like somebody using a Switch 1 today type of thing. It's certainly not something you would have tossed out at the time. So I think that would match up perfectly. But for me, I would use it for those, but I would also use it for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, original Xbox, Wii. Really, all of those are just perfect for that, because even if it does do some scaling, it's not as crazy as going to 4K. So that's just my opinion on that. Anybody else too, if you've done this and your CRT mask emulation looks perfect, please let me know. Maybe I'm missing a setting on my plasma. It's actually, my plasma is sitting behind the OLED right now. Yeah, classy guy that I am, as a TV in front of a TV. But I don't take it out often, but when I do, it's pairing it exactly with the consoles you would expect. I wouldn't put a Super Nintendo on it, especially when I have CRTs right there. But one would argue that some of those other consoles would look better on that than on an OLED without a scaler. So I love my plasma, but maybe give cheap and easy a try first and see how you like it. Next up, Pippin wants to know if I could recommend a UK power adapter for the Japanese Saturn that doesn't rely on a power converter. No, I got nothing. I'm so sorry, Pippin. I think in that scenario, you would want to look at a replacement internal PSU. And that's the one where you just, when you're talking about internal power supply replacements, you really want to make sure to get a good one. And then you're going to need an external brick to match that is equal quality. So an international Triad or Meanwell PSU on the outside, that's kind of easy. But you'd have to find an internal one, or you would need to buy a power converter. So does anybody have any suggestions? And once again, I know I say this every time, but please remember that if you just drop links in the YouTube description, it's probably going to get automatically deleted. So just type it out, buy this converter from this store type of thing. And if you're on the support services, all links should work. So sorry, I got absolutely nothing for you, but hopefully you could find a good internal power supply replacement and then just have an external DC to DC converter to run it. Next up, Rumbleman said they just picked up one of the COSAM Neptune boards, and while it'll be harder than any of the soldering projects they've tackled so far, they're excited to give it a go. However, they're missing a few key tools that they'll need, and they're wondering if I had any recommendations for a starter hot air rework station that won't cost more than the entire rest of the project. So I like the one that I use, but please remember I am not a pro modder and I do not have the skill sets of a lot of the people that you see in all of these videos. So for the one that I have, which I believe is just linked in the tools page, I'm pretty sure it's a knockoff, but it's worked fine. It has the different nozzles. I don't have any issues with it. The only thing I would say is that if you're not used to using a hot air rework station, practice on anything else. Go to the junkyard, go to a Goodwill, whatever, find any electronics that's just garbage and junk that has chips on it with fine solder points, tiny little pins on it, and try practicing on that. You'll also want to get one of those suction cup thingies I always see Tito use in his videos, which I probably should buy those, but I don't know why I haven't over the years, but those look pretty cool as well. But that's basically it. And the suction cup thing is cool because it'll allow you to suction to the chip. So while you're using the hot air station with one hand, you could put tension on it. I'm choosing my words carefully because you do not want to pull up, because then you could rip pads, you could break pins. There's a whole bunch of stuff you could do. So just put a little upward tension, just to the point where, maybe if one side starts to come up, you'll feel it shift, but if the other side is still on there, you're not going to bend it over in one spot. Tito shows that in his videos as well, but be very, very careful with this. I've broken so much equipment. In fact, that's why I can speak so confidently to these answers, even when I know I'm not a top tier soldering person. I've broken so much I could tell you what not to do with the utmost confidence. So yeah, so I would love to hear other people's opinions on this, though. Are you people who are any of you who are listening have done the COSAM Neptune board chip transplant using those cheap hot air rework stations? Did you have any issues at all? Did you have to use some crazy name brand one? But my guess is that one of the cheaper ones should be fine, as long as you're just very, very careful and practice on other stuff first. But if anybody has any thoughts, definitely let me know. Well, that's it for this week. As always, if you have any questions, ask wherever it is that you support in the latest Q&A post, because the way these services work, I can't really figure out what's a new question on an old post. Plus, as you saw here today, I like just scrolling through and answering them all laid back as if we were hanging out at an expo somewhere or something like that. And this week, all the questions were on Patreon, but anybody who supports on any of them is welcome to ask a question. Patreon has the most supporters, which is why you see most of those questions coming up every week. But any questions you have, fire away. If for whatever reason I don't want to answer it, I'll just tell you that. It happens every now and then, and it doesn't happen often, but it's just usually to avoid unnecessary negativity. And but don't ever hesitate to ask a question, any question at all. The worst case scenario is I'll just message you and say, I don't really feel like answering it, and hopefully you're not offended by that. But anyway, thank you to everybody who supports in any way whatsoever, because it really is you who's keeping all this stuff going. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week.